All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of What's What BR. We have returning guest and friend and Superintendent of the Year, Mr. Wesley Watts. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Brandon. Good to be with you, man. Thanks for having me back.
Pulled the intro out the rabbit of the hat at the last minute. It hit me.
I like that.
I like to bring it in there. So, for anybody who doesn't know, I'll drag it out for a little bit. You have been named the Superintendent of the Year, West Baton Rouge Parish. So, you've got a lot to do and a lot to keep up with. Because you got to keep doing it now, right?
Right.
You set the bar for yourself at this point, right?
That's right. Yep.
So,
No doubt.
Well, I appreciate you making some time and coming back to hang out with us and kind of tell us what's happening, going over there. A lot going on over there, it seems like. People are busy, people are moving, and we're on the back end. I didn't realize till the other day, it really hit me. My daughter is 13, about to be 14. And I was talking with her this weekend. It was like a dance competition. I was like, wait a minute, you're on the tail end. Like, we're about to be done. Like, school is, we're getting close. And it hit me with a ton of bricks because next year she's going to be a freshman.
Wow.
And that just really just rattled me a little bit. So how are things right now with you guys? Is it y'all starting to feel like you see the end? We're early February, but we still got to get to sometime probably middle of May. But
yeah, middle of May. Yeah, and you're over the halfway point. And coming back from Christmas, starting the second semester is always kind of a refresher. It's like, okay, let's get this thing rolling again because you have a pretty good little break there. And right now, you're feeling a little bit of the pressure of testing coming up into March, April. So you're kind of pushing towards that. But you can see the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of you realize that, we've had more days of school already than we're going to have, than we have left. Right, so we're probably approximately 70 days of school left, and when you think you started off 180, you're like, wow, we've been in school 110 days. That's or right at that. And I'm ballparking it, Brandon, but yeah, less than 100 days left, a lot less than 100. So we celebrate the 100th day of a school. Especially our elementary schools. They have a lot of fun with that. They dress up as old people, and we have a lot of fun with that, celebrating the 100 days of school. And that was a couple of weeks ago. So
yeah, mine did it. Maybe a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, I saw some pictures, and my first thought was, I'm like, I wonder how long this is going to last before somebody says we're offending, the older generation, and we can't do it.
This is true. This is true. Oh man, that gets kind of frustrating, but the key to that is just we're going to respect everybody, but not live in fear, man, because somebody will find something to be offended about.
Me and my neighbor were talking, and we were talking about this whole thing, and I just said my answer from now on is just, well, I'm offended that you're offended. So let's just move on.
Let's get beyond that, right? I love it.
Exactly. So I guess if we're saying, we're down to, 70 days, that's probably where we've got seniors starting to get a little antsy, and, we're counting down days, right?
Yeah, I think, typically your ACT test is about the second week of March, third week of March, somewhere in that area, which is a big day. And it seems like after that, really after that spring break, the Easter holiday kind of thing, senioritis, we call it, starts setting in. And I get it. It's a real thing. And they start getting excited. So, and I don't blame them. It's been a long time. Everybody looks forward to their senior year, right? And so it's here for them. And I'm just glad that it's kind of back to somewhat of being normal school for them. And that they'll have a normal end of their senior year, because they had a couple of years that were not normal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, tell me, I think you mentioned, March and big time, there with, seniors and testing, but that's also probably, a time we've got session coming into play. And for better or worse, God help us, as we, get into this. But what is that? Does that give you any thoughts, any questions? You got anything going on in there? Or
yeah. At this point, we're actually trying to meet with different legislators, trying to share some of our thoughts and trying to be, over the last couple of years, we worked really hard to try to maybe be more preemptive. What it seems like we've done in the past is kind of sit and wait for education bills to come out and then whine and complain about them, right? As opposed to let's be proactive and go and sit and visit with legislators. What are some things we would like, those of us in the field that are doing this every day, what are some things that our legislators could do, maybe being proactive about offering some legislation. Again, it always seems like we just wait for the bad ones and we want to go fight against the things that we don't want. And so we're doing that now. We have a committee put together from our superintendents, a legislative committee and an accountability committee, just to to really be proactive and go visit with legislators and say, hey, this is who we are, this is what we're after. And, our priorities as superintendents right now are having students reading on grade level by the third grade, right? Mm-hmm. And how important that is. Having students graduate with either college credit or some type of industry-based credential, right? And then thirdly, it was just helping us to find a way to recruit people to the profession. And that's our priorities right now. And working with legislators, is there something they can do to try and help us? And so an example of that right now would be the retire rehire, working on that, because right now, and I get it, people were retiring and then being rehired the next day for a full salary and getting their full retirement, and we know that's not sustainable. So the laws that have been placed maybe swung the pendulum a little too far, right? What we have now. And so right now, if you're retired, you can't work for a year in a school system, and then if you do, you can only make up to like 25% of your retirement benefit. Well, nobody really wants to come work for that. Right now, we do have a teacher shortage, and we are fighting to find ways to have substitutes. And so maybe if we just up that percentage, maybe make that 50% or something, that'd be a little bit more incentive that it doesn't break. The biggest thing is we want to work with TRSL too. Like, none of us want TRSL to not be whole, right? That's our future also. It doesn't make any sense to break that. So is there a way to do that, to keep TRSL whole, and then also create more opportunities for us in terms of hiring? So right now it's about going and sitting and visiting with legislators and the pre-filed bill. We probably missed that deadline in terms of anything that we really wanted to push. But you still have time for legislators to put bills in, and meeting with them, hearing where they're coming from in terms of education, and then hopefully being proactive on some things that maybe they can help us with. And so this session's big about that because it's not fiscal. And so in the fiscal session, they can only put 5 bills and everything's supposed to be about finance. This one, they can submit as many bills as they want about anything they want. So
pack as much in there, right? Do you find, and I guess this is more, I guess it's more of a relative question, but being superintendent of the year, do you feel that your phone's ringing maybe a little bit more of people maybe asking questions like, hey, we should go to Wes and ask him what he thinks?
No, but I will say this, for the last 3 years, I've been an officer on our state superintendent association called LAS, Louisiana Association of School Superintendents. And so I've been an officer, and last year I served as the president, and that was part of my role, right? Now we have an executive director to do a lot of that for us, but part of the role is trying to do some of these things on a state level, representing the whole body, right? And so it probably rings a little bit more, not because of state superintendent of the year. In fact, probably the state superintendent of the year piece, some of it came about because of some of the work I was able to do statewide, right, as an officer. Mm-hmm. It probably helped, lead us to maybe receiving that honor more than the flip side of what you were saying. So I think it's probably ringing more now just because I spent a lot of time at the Capitol last year, built some relationships, which were good. And as the immediate past president, still kind of being connected to the last officer leadership group. So there's still that connection to legislators.
That's a whole nother, I would think, that's a whole nother job in itself almost, it sounds like. To where you got your day job, sitting there at the schools and making sure that the teachers are taken care of and facilities are there. And then it's like, hey, I'm signed up for this other gig now. I got to go do this. Yeah,
and it's voluntary. And I will say, very thankful that I have an amazing staff here in West Baton Rouge Parish. So I was able last year to really spend some time at the Capitol because I have very competent, very professional, very qualified people here, making sure things are rolling like this. So now I didn't neglect it. But it gave me a little bit more freedom. And then I'm right here. I can hop across the river and be at the Capitol, in no time. So that's been the struggle for us as an association. Like, you're trying to run your school system, and then you're also trying to support our association. So we hired an executive director, a retired superintendent 2 years ago, and that's what they're doing, trying to do more of this for us. Just because you just don't have time. We don't have time to invest what we really need to invest in terms of going and meeting with. So we're trying to do it when we can. It's just really hard to have the time to do it like it needs to be done, and still run your school system and still try to visit my schools every week, that kind of thing.
So tell me, and jumping along, I guess, segue some way or another, but talking about time, I know you guys have, well, first, before I say it, everybody has got this labor shortage, that we've talked about, and I've talked to a number of people about it, and it's not even, when you really get down, from what I understand, it's not even a COVID, it's not a COVID thing. It's just an overall labor shortage that's timed up with COVID, but it's not direct correlation to it. You guys have got a job fair, showing up, but the question, and you and I have talked about it before, and you were the first person to make me, think about it, and I've spoke about it a number of times on the show, is that we've got to do a better job of reminding students that education is also a field that you can go into. We're not just teaching you to be a doctor, a lawyer, an astronaut, a plumber, a welder, an AC guy, but hey, you could stay here in the education world, reminding them of that. And I guess I'm asking a couple of things at one time, but from the job market, is it hard finding teachers right now? You guys have a job fair coming up in about 30 days or so, 32 days, something March 10th, I think.
March 10th, absolutely. Yes, sir. You can put that out there, please. March 10th, come on over. Our schools will have every school principal and staff represented there to meet you. And one of the things we're going to try to do this year, because there are fewer teachers out there right now. That's a real thing. It's a national issue, but there are also fewer bus drivers, and there are also fewer everybody. So every market, right, every profession is struggling to find employees. That we're very likely that if we can make it happen, we're going to try, and something we don't typically do, but go ahead and if we have spots, go ahead and sign those people up at the fair, if at all possible.
Oh, wow.
And try to do as much as we can, get as close as we can to making it official right there. Typically, we come back, we do a follow-up interview, because I like to know everybody that's going to be in my school system just to get to know them. But we may have to speed up our process a little bit, just to make sure we're making it as easy as possible for people that we want. So that's what we're trying to do. But I'll tell you this, Brandon. I shared this with some folks. David Alexander, the superintendent of Ascension Parish, and I are really close, and we talk a lot. He sent me something about a presentation that he had been a part of that showed that there's there were teacher shortage of 2 million nationwide. 2 million teachers short nationwide. That presentation was in 2000.
Oh, gosh.
So we're 21 years later, and we're still having the same conversation. So obviously, we're not listening, right? When I say us, I think it's on us too as educators, but everybody. So we've been talking about this teacher crisis since 2000. And so what have we done differently? What have we done? So that's what I'm trying to think about. What can I do differently, right, than what we've done in the past? And we're pretty good. I mean, we were pretty good, well staffed this year. Maybe a couple little technical positions that are hard to find anyway. But what are we doing differently? And that's what I've shared with you before. We have to change the narrative about education. It is a great profession. It really is. It's hard.
I mean, how much leeway is there for somebody in your position, or for a public school system, to where, like, while you were talking about that, my mind kind of drifted into, there's a lot of schools that are now starting to have, you'll see like a welding program, on site at the school, or you'll see, they're leaving the campus and maybe we'll work one day, at a real job. Education's changing so much, but while you were sitting there saying that, it's like, is there the leeway? It's like, if you were to try to get people into education, it's like you have every single thing you need there. You don't need to go build the welding shop. It's like, can you take that senior in high school and say, hey, if you're interested, for, a 9-week program, you're going to work as like a teacher's aide, while you're still in high school, to see, do you like this? Are they able to do things like that? Can you?
We're doing that. It's called Educators Rising. And they are literally going in and almost doing like a quasi-student teacher spot during that class. So it's a class, and they're actually going and doing some of those things. They're actually learning how to do teacher observations. They're actually helping with our tutoring program, so they can go and start working with our younger kids. So our high school kids are actually going to work with our younger students after school and doing some tutoring. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to give them access to more of what it means to be a teacher now than we ever have. And so that's just been something we've been passionate about here. We started it, I want to say 3 years ago, and it's really going well. And, the volume, it'll take time to get the volume, but we have a lot of folks that we know are going into education, and we feel like we're helping them too. They're going to be more prepared just to go into that field of education when they leave us also. And I would go ahead. I'm sorry. So I was just going to say, and we've been working with the universities also. One of the things I think I've shared this before on the show, Brandon, but realizing that you don't go straight into education as a major, that you go into a content area, like I'm going to go be an English major or a math major or something, and after your sophomore year, then you apply to the College of Education, and you have to have a 2.5 GPA. My struggle with that is every other field you go in and you major in it your freshman year.
Yeah.
I get the 2.5 GPA, but you know what happens? A lot of people when they first get to college, right, their freshman year is it may not be their best academic year. They're going out and look, they're exploring life. They're being they're being kids and having a good time. And maybe that GPA isn't where it needs to be. That don't mean they shouldn't be able to be a teacher, right? And so the universities have been really open to that, and we're working on trying to make some of those changes.
Yeah, I'm almost picturing it being, you're in, West Baton Rouge, we're right here across the river, and I consider Baton Rouge, West Baton Rouge, it's all one big small town,
right.
At the end of the day. It would almost seem pretty neat if you could almost have like in my mind, I'm thinking of it as like almost like kind of a boomerang type program to where it's like, hey, if you want to be able to, pursue this, push it out, step through these milestones, do this, and we've got a spot for you when you're ready to come back. Yeah. To where if you could do something like that, to where I would think a lot of people might want to come back to some of their same programs where it's like, hey, we've got a pass for you.
Yeah.
Here. So I think that's what a lot of kids are looking for.
That's what we're doing.
Not.
Yeah.
It's not what it used to be, where you go to college, get the degree, and it was pretty much guaranteed you'd have a job.
Yeah, that's right. I think
it's completely different. So if you could have something like that.
We call it grow your own. We're trying to grow our own, right? Grow our own leaders, grow our own teachers, and look, we have great relationships with the universities around. They do a great job of sending student teachers to us, and once we get them a student teacher, it's like that's where we capture. Like they fall in love with our schools and our kids, and that's a big recruiting piece. But this is actually even a step ahead of that, as you're saying. Our own say, hey, you go on. You've been in this Educators Rising program. You're going to have a spot when you finish. And get your certification and get your degree. We'll be waiting for you. So it's really good. But we're in year 3 or 4. We'll start seeing our first teachers come out. I don't know if it's this year or next year that have been a part of this. So I'm excited to see that.
That'd be interesting to see that first one, kind of how they made full circle and to be able to see the progress. So
some of them came back and worked on learning, so it was neat to have them back.
Yeah. So you tell me, talking about all these programs that I'm thinking are maybe really cool ideas. Sounds like you've already got them going. We had talked a little bit beforehand that you guys have, you call it, the character, education and, transport skills, which is not traditionally what you would think. It's not a math, a science, and English, you'd see in the school. But to me, it's just as important, if not more important, on some of that.
100%.
Which is some of those skills, like I'd mentioned to you, we were talking, I've got a daughter that's not afraid to say anything to anybody as long as it's through her phone. But if I got to make her go order something, at a counter or to speak to a waitress, she kind of can get a little nervous, on that. It's like, how is this happening? They've lost the skill.
Yeah.
They've lost it somewhere along the line. It's like we had to always, we all grew up in if I needed to tell you something, I had to get on my bike and ride down and go knock on your door and your parents would answer the door and I'd have to make small talk with them. And they told me to look at them in the eye when I was talking to them. And, and then after about 10 minutes, then I could talk to, my buddy that I was going to go see. And, now all that's out the window. I've got a teenager that keeps the door shut and an iPhone open. So.
Yep. Yeah, and so those things still are just as valuable, just as important for employers. We talk to our business and industry all the time about what they need, right? Because we feel like part of our job is helping build a workforce at some point in time. And so when you were talking about those transportable skills, I am at least. I'm a big believer in teaching the whole student. I just believe that we're not Pez dispensers of information, especially with this, because you can get any information you want right here in about 3 seconds, right? You plug it in and Google whatever you want. But what are we doing with that information? And then how are we relating to other people? That's still probably the most important thing in any profession, isn't it? I mean, if you ask business and industry and say, would you rather have somebody that has a lot of technical skill and no social skills, no integrity, or no work ethic? Or would you rather have somebody that has social skills, a work ethic, the ability to get along with others, the ability to communicate, and then teach them the technical skills? And they will always tell you they would choose that person first that has those transportable skills. We call them transportable because these are skills that across all professions, all
Mhm.
all fields. It's not specific to a medical field, a carpentry field, anything like that. But the ability to be able to communicate clearly, written and orally, the ability to be dependable and responsible, the ability to be able to get along with others that you work with, even if you disagree with them, right? All those things are just of critical importance for a student to be all that they want to be. You can be as smart as you want, but if you don't have those things, then you're still going to be limited, right? And so we just believe in teaching them, and we think it's just as important. I've told you many times that it's what's doing for us when they leave us. What do they know? What skills do they have? But then thirdly is what kind of person are they? And I think they're all equally important. I think if you have two of the three, you're not going to maximize your potential. You're not going to go as far as you'd like to go. And so we just think all of them are really important. We're teaching them as much as we can day in and day out, but we have a couple programs. We use Manners of the Heart, which is a character education curriculum that's about respect for everybody by everybody, that we use in our elementary schools. And then we do something that we've been working with called Capturing Kids' Hearts. And that's more for our adults in terms of how to relate with students and you have to win the heart before you win the mind. You know, and I shared this with you before, and I can't remember who it was. I want to say it was Martin Luther King. I think Dr. King said, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. It might have been Aristotle, or maybe something he repeated, but he has something along the same thing, that if we're not educating the heart of our students, then we're not really giving them a complete education.
Well, I think that's, you know, I've got a buddy who's got a contractor. He's a contractor, and he's done very well for himself. And I remember one time you were talking about these transportable skills. I was asking him, I was like, you know, what do you think? I'm like, there's a contractor on every time you turn around, everybody knows somebody. I'm like, what's made you successful? He goes, it's real simple. It's two things. And I'm like, what is that? He goes, I do what I say I'm going to do, and I show up when I say I'm going to show up. He goes, I never run out of work. Because that's just, it's that. And we dug into it a little bit, but one of the things that stuck out is he goes, look, I make it a point to never make my clients feel like I'm rushed. I sit and I just talk with them, and we go over things, and we may not even be talking. He goes, but it's that skill, that relationship that's built, and people feel comfortable. And he goes, at least 50% of the time I'm working on a job and I'm checking on guys, and I'm just kind of having candid conversations with people, you know, and in the middle of the conversation up pops another project that they want us to work on. And that's that skill. Like, and he's, you know, he'll tell you, he's like, I'm not the best, you know, but I'm there when I say we're going to be there, you know, and that's important. And so I think that's what you're talking about, some of that transportable, that skill that people need.
100%. You just nailed it, Brandon. You just summarized it perfectly, because, and what people call it, they have a lot of different things for it, but a lot of times you hear it as soft skills. We're changed that terminology to transportable skills, because soft almost has that like, okay, it's not that important. We say transportable because it's important for everybody, for every field, right? But you just said it. I mean, I probably shouldn't say this, but I would think one of the things that I was able to sell or share with the board when they hired me as a superintendent, I was a high school principal, was that I was going to work harder than anybody else you could hire. I was going to love the kids in this community more than anybody else could love this. I'm going to be full of integrity. I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. And it was really about, I'm going to make connections with the community. I'm going to invest myself in this community because it's important, and those connections are important. And, you know, building trust is everything in terms of leadership. Like, the number one way that you can lead effectively is to do that through building trust in others, because they don't trust you, then you're going to lose them. They're not going to follow. They're not going to want to be a part of it. And I think that's what your friend was talking about, in that even in the corporate world, he built trust in his business, and people want to work with somebody that they can trust. And I think that's a skill, man. It's something that you can do. Do what you say you're going to do. Like he said, do it when you say you're going to do it, and own up to, if something doesn't work out where it doesn't work out perfectly, own it and move on from it. Say what happened and let's go. And so I think those skills are equally, if not more important than others.
No, I think, and you're right. Like with a phone, you can always look up, you know, the information, you know, the history, you can look it up. And I'm not downplaying that you don't need to know all that stuff. I think you do, but it's really, it's about those relationships, as you build them. I think there's a couple things that I boil it down to. It's about relationships, one. Two, back to what you mentioned with, Jill's program with Manage the Heart, it's about respect. I think if people respected each other and respected other people's property, a whole lot of problems would go away.
You're not going to steal
if you just did.
Right.
If you respect them and respect their property, yes, you're not, destroying their property, you're not stealing from them. It's hold the door open for somebody.
Yep.
I think it's that. And then I've got it's on, I'm looking at the whole time we're talking here is I have it on my computer. I've got it on my wallpaper. It's about, adapting and changing. It's William Pollard is the quote. And I've got it's the arrogance of success is to think that what you did yesterday will be sufficient tomorrow. And I think that's especially true. And I'm not big on involved in education other than, getting the kids there and making sure that they're there on time. That's about my extent of my contribution, and then the pickups from the late practices. But it seems it's changing. Like you mentioned, these different programs that are there. It's not the same school systems. It's not the same school that, when I was in school or probably when you were in school. I think people are realizing that, hey, just because we did it this way before, that's not what we need,
Right.
And I think and you've mentioned it a lot. And what I really respect about what you guys are doing, and not only the programs, but also realizing that not everyone's college bound, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely. We have to reframe that. And really, and I've had discussions with people, when you say that now if you think that now you're disenfranchising 70% of the United States population, because only 31% of the people in the United States have a 4-year college degree. And there are a lot of successful people out there that don't have a college degree, but they work hard, they have a skill, they're dependable, right? They do what they say they're going to do, as you said, and they've learned a skill, a trade, or they have some business moxie to them. As much as, hey, the biggest thing for us in education is if somebody wants to go to college, it's our job to prepare them to go do that so they can have that option, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody that wants it. But not everybody wants it, and that's not for everybody. And I think from our perspective, we have to promote that it is okay. I have 2 nephews that, and my family is a family of educators that didn't, and they're doing great. They love the job they have, providing for their family. And what more could you ask for? You do something you enjoy doing, you provide for your family. That's success in my book.
Right. Well, tell me, is there a way, or do you see a path? I'm thinking, as you're saying, it's okay. 30% of the, people have a 4-year degree. Okay. So now we've chopped 70% of the population out from education. Now we've got 30% to deal with, and, what percentage of the 30, percent are going into education? Is there a path, or do you see, at some point where it's maybe easier to get into education without that degree, or there's other programs, or like you got a VOTEC, you can go see these VOTEC programs. Do you see that ever down the road, or is it, hey, just be a teacher's aide?
Yeah, that's a tough question. And so right now we're actually kind of working on trying to branch out and do more of our own that way. So our 2 high schools, because it's really hard if you don't have enough students that want to be, say, in an electrical class. If I don't have enough students in one school, then I can't offer it. But if I take 2 schools, and between the 2 schools, the 2 high schools that I do have enough students, then if I can provide 1 teacher instead of 2, now everybody gets served, right? So yeah, that's tough. I think there are ways for those vocational skills to possibly come back in those routes, and we try to work those things out. Your core content classes, no, you're going to have the degree, and I get that. We're here trying to help develop students into college level students if they choose to go do that. And so I was just saying, you can't disenfranchise 70% of the population by saying, oh, well, you're less than because you don't have a college degree. That's just absurd. In fact, it changed here in the state. A few years ago, you heard every kid is going to college. Well, that's just not even, it doesn't make sense, honestly, because if you look around us and where we live, a lot of it's regional. What are your workforce needs regionally? Do you need a bunch of college, and I don't want to say college educated, but people with a bunch of college education, or do you need people with technical skills? there's some pretty famous and wealthy people that never had a college degree that are in what you would consider technical, our our software or our social media fields. There's some people that are pretty well off right now, and they didn't finish college, right?
Right. No, and I think I've got family up in, Iowa, Minnesota. These guys are on the farms.
Yeah.
And, you need those guys, and that's what you need, but and some of that, that gets very technical. You've got to, it's not like it used to be, it's a lot more electronic and a lot more internet these days in that, farming world. So you're still learning no matter what. I think that's, the trick. Every day you're learning something.
It's fascinating. I don't know if you've seen some of these tractors. Like, we have a lot of sugarcane over here, right? And if you've watched or been a part of some of these tractors are really expensive, and they're almost like little robots. Like, so they're trying to, as they're planting the field or cutting the rows, like it's all GPS driven, to where the tractor almost drives itself. You have to be able to work. It's almost like you need to be on the laptop where the tractor goes where the laptop's telling it, right? It's really, really technical nowadays in some of those ways. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it's managing systems.
Yeah.
Now at this point, it's not turning the wheel and trying to drive straight. So.
Yeah, and it makes it easier because it's being driven now on a GPS system where that road is going to be straight, right?
Yeah.
Versus relying on the skill of the driver. But now, so the skill changed. Instead of having been able to see straight ahead and see the path of the road or whatever, now it's working the system, managing the system, like you said. So
right. Well, no, so tell me, if we run back just for a second, I want to make sure we hit this, because that's obviously where we're driving at, is this, the job fair in March, so that people, so what's the goal is to bring teachers into the school system, West Baton Rouge Parish school system. And so it's open game for anybody, right? Anybody can make their way out.
Absolutely.
So whether you're working someplace else or not, we're not going to tell anybody that you're there. We're not checking names. We're not emailing anybody.
Absolutely not. We will not call a reference until you give us the go ahead to do so. And it is open for anybody. And I will say this, we have probably the best, I'm a little bit biased, but my human resources director worked at the State Department in certification and probably knows every possible way there is for somebody to get certified. If say they're coming from and my son just did this. My son graduated in graphic design and went and worked in that field for a couple of years and said, Dad, I want to go coach and teach. And it's just now finishing up being certified, and he's been teaching for about a year and a half now. And so there's ways for that to happen. So if there's somebody out there that's thinking they want to do it, understand the job fair for me is like bringing a college football recruit onto the LSU campus. We're bringing people into our world and trying to sell our schools, because for me, the best way for me to make my schools better is to hire great people. It's really that simple. And the best way for me to hire great people is connect with as many as I possibly can, and
so let me jump back to that, just because I think sometimes people get in their own world and they skip over it. And I think I've heard about this before, but and if I kind of paint it with an analogy, that if we've got Susie, and Susie has been maybe had a professional career doing XYZ, doing something, and then decided to take time off, and had a child and was planning to go back into XYZ field. That's not the only answer. In theory, a lot of times you'll find, and we know a lot of this in the parenting space, in our publications, people will leave and say, I'm going to go back to work when my child goes back to school. But the problem is that works when you say, a lot of times, when you've just had the baby, because it's so far away. But what you don't realize is once you put them back into school, now you're fighting they go to school at 8, they get out at 3. If I go back to work, I got to leave. How do I pick them up? Who's going to take it? It turns into this problem. But where I'm driving this is, for somebody who's not connecting the dot, you could be Susie with XYZ and say, you know what? My child is going into school. They are in, West Baton Rouge. They're going to go to the school. I could go to the job fair, maybe find out what it would take in order for me to get certified. I don't have to go back to, I don't have to go back and enroll at a university to become a teacher, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what is that at a high level for somebody who goes, wait a minute, this might be an option. I could drop my kid off at school, drive 3 miles down the road, teach, interact with students, have a job that seem fulfilled, help with kids. And when school's out, I can pick up my child and go, and now my problem's solved.
Yeah. So there's several options. One, so my son had a degree, and so he could start teaching. As long as he's working towards his certification. And there are programs out there that we have access to that you do things online. They actually come to school and maybe work with you. And I actually was that way. I was not an education, I was a pre-med major. I was going to physical therapy school, changed my mind after 4 years of college, turned down my acceptance to physical therapy school and said, I want to coach and teach. So I got my degree, taught science because I had a lot of science courses, obviously. And then I started working towards my certification, which back then it was a lot harder than it is now. Now there are programs that within a year or so you can be certified no matter what you were doing if you had a degree. Now, if you don't have a degree, let's say maybe you can go back to school and work as a paraprofessional, right? And you can work at that while we work on you either finishing your degree and your certification. So if that worked, that may not work out financially, but if you have a degree, you can go teach, and then we can work with you from that point on to get your teacher certification. And there are a lot of programs out there that's really been hot the last few years because I think people recognize that if we're going to expand our pool, it can't just be people who said, you know what, I want to go be a teacher. They go into the College of Education, they graduate in it, because the same thing happens there. Some people get into teaching and say, you know what, this isn't what I want to do. They choose to go do something else. So it has to work both ways, right? It needs to work both ways. Mm-hmm. I think we've been smarter about that over the last few years. And there are programs out there we can help people. We can get you certified.
And so stating the obvious but driving it home, even if you're not certified, even if you're not a teacher, but you've got questions, you want to dig into this a little more, the job fair, come to the job fair. You'll have people who can answer some questions. You can give them a roadmap.
Yep.
And then back to, look at this, I'm going to tie the whole thing into a bow as we wrap this up. If you've got those transport skills, that you've got the personality and you can look someone in the eye and you can talk and you can say, I'd love to be part of this. And like you said, I'm going to love the kids more than anybody else, and I'm going to get involved. And you guys are like, look, this is the one. We just got to help them get from, A, B, C. We're going to help you connect the dots, and we're going to, help you do that.
And why wouldn't we do that? I mean, we want great people, right? We want great people, and they come from a lot of different areas. And it don't mean that you had to. It used to be educators. We were a little bit finicky about that. It's like, oh no, you're not a college. You didn't go into the field College of Education, then you can't be a teacher. I need somebody that loves kids, that I can depend on, that's willing to work hard, and that's willing to be prepared and invest in our children. And if you can do that, we'll find a place for you. We'll find a way for you to get the certification that you need to do that. And wouldn't any professional field do that, for the most part?
I was quoted many years ago in a magazine, and it pops up every now and then. I find it online, or somebody will say it, and so I bring somebody interviewed and was like, what's the key, or what do you think the one thing somebody needs to do, to be successful? And it was an off the cuff, and my answer was just find something you love to do and show up.
Passion. If you're passionate about it, you're going to be great at it, right? So, we can teach you the technical side of it. If you're passionate about it, then then it's going to work out, and that's what I would have. That's what I would rather have.
Awesome. Well, Wes, I appreciate you spending some time with us. As always, this is always fun. And, I think you and I just, we hit it off. We go through, cover a whole bunch of stuff, and hopefully everybody kind of knows what's going on. And if anything, for anybody, Wes is that approachable. So if you're a parent, if you're that, go walk in his office. I tend to do it every now and then.
Yeah, man, I love it. In fact, today was a great day. We met with a student advisory group. We had students from our middle and high schools, and we sat and we just talked about what are we doing well in our district. What would you like to see us improve? And we talked about being a leader and what that means. And we talked about a lot of these things. It's about influence. It's about being respectful, being responsible, and being the best that you can be. That's what being a leader is. And so I had a great time with several of our students today. And so, yeah, anytime, man. I'd love for people to come out to the job fair. It's a great profession. You get to impact kids for the rest of their life, and there's nothing like that.
Awesome. Well, I tell everybody, especially you got more important things to do than sit around and talk to me all day. So I appreciate you taking some time and letting us run through and know what's going on. And hopefully some people will give it some thought. Like you said, there's a demand for teachers, and it sounds like you've got a path. If they've got the passion, you've got the path.
Absolutely. That's a great way of putting it. So I appreciate you selling that for me. Thanks. I always enjoy it. I can talk about education, but I love it. And I appreciate you giving me the opportunity.
Awesome, sir. Well, I appreciate it. We'll talk again soon.
All right. Thanks, Brandon. Have a good one.
All right.